Morning.
Morning all. Chanukah Sameach to everybody. Shavua Tov. Chodesh Tov for tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Tuesday, Wednesday. Anyway, Shmuel Bet. Last week I suggested that if you didn't want to know what was going on in this next exciting episode of what Avner was going to do, Avner, the big, strong general of Shaul, that you shouldn't read on. Did anybody read on?
Mm.
That's an easy piece of homework, that, isn't it? Don't do something. Right? I never got homework like that at school. Don't read on. That was never homework we ever got. Anyway, let's have a look then. It's quite remarkable what's going to happen next. So if you don't know, here goes. Let's put the screen on and we'll see. We're in Shmuel Bet and we're going to start at verse 6. No, I'm going to start actually, before we get to that, I'm going to go back to verse 5. Remember last week we spoke about the six sons of David and we spoke about the second son who was called Chilav or Daniel, depending on which book you read it in. And here's another example of a name that might be a different name. Verse 5, Jeffrey.
The sixth was Ithream, and in brackets, born to Eglah, David's, and in brackets, main wife. These were born to David in Hebron.
Right, so there you go. That's an interesting thing. We haven't got main wife in our translation, but that helps us quite a lot, actually. Anybody heard of Eglah?
No.
No. So what is going on here that the Art Scroll Tanakh describes Eglah, who none of us have ever heard of, as David's main wife. If I were to ask you who was David's main wife, what would you answer?
Michal. Michal.
Who would say Michal? Anybody else?
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba would be a reasonable suggestion, I think. Any others? I'd put a pitch in for Abigail because she saved him from killing Naval and all sorts of things. So I think that she might have a go. But nobody would say Eglah because nobody's heard of Eglah. So who was Eglah, Peter?
Eglah. Maybe Michal. I don't know. Another name for Michal.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Another name for Michal. Another name for Michal. Eglah is actually the same person as
The voice is gone.
But it goes after the first 2 minutes, and then and it seems to be they don't like it for around 2 minutes. So I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but it's just a fact of our Zoom. I'm waiting for Michael to turn his finger the right way. It's getting there. There we go. Right. So it turns out that Eglah is, in fact, as Peter correctly guessed, another name for Michal. And that is why the Art Scroll translates or adds in the word main wife to where it says David's wife.
How do we know that?
How do that? Midrash. Midrash tells us. So it turns out that there was. Well, let me take you to chapter 6 of Shmuel Bet, which we will get to in a couple of months' time, I suspect. But let's just have a look at it now. It's on the screen for you, Jeffrey. This is the story of when they brought the Aron HaKodesh into Ir David. It had been captured by the Plishtim and then had been taken somewhere else. And you'll see the whole story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story now, but eventually it was brought into Ir David, the city of David, with great pomp and ceremony. Read from verse 16 onwards, Jeffrey, please.
And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, peered through the window, and she saw the king David hopping and dancing before the Lord, and she loathed him in her heart. And they brought the ark of the Lord, and they sat it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings before the Lord, and peace offerings. And David finished offering the burnt offering and the peace offerings, and he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he distributed to all the people, to the whole multitude of Israel, pardon me, both to men and women, to each individual, a loaf of bread and a portion of meat, and a barrel of wine. And all the people departed, every one to his home. And David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David, and she said, "How honored was today the king of Israel, who exposed himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as would expose himself one of the idlers." And David said unto Michal, "Before the Lord, who chose me above your father and above all his house, to appoint me prince over the people of the Lord over Israel, therefore I have made merry before the Lord. And if I be demeaned more than this, and be abashed in my own eyes, yet of the maidservants of which you have spoken with them will I get me honor." And Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death.
Okay, so this story here, basically what happens is they bring the ark, there's a big ceremony, a big fancy pomp and ceremony, and David starts dancing like a Mshugana and making a great celebration because the Aron HaKodesh is coming home. And Michal says to him, "You shouldn't have done that. You're the king. You shouldn't have behaved in such a demeaning manner." And she was very critical of him. And David dismisses her criticism and says, "You're wrong. It's Hashem that chose me, and it's right and it's correct that I celebrate before Hashem. And if people think that's demeaning, well, that's their problem." And he's very critical of Michal. And then it seems by verse 23 that Michal is punished. Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. So Michal had no child. So if we go back to our Pasuk 5, the sixth Itriam of Eglah, David's main wife, Morshim say that Eglah was Michal. Well, how does that work? If Michal had no child, how did Itriam come to be born if Eglah is Michal? You see our problem.
There's two possibles.
Go on, Hannah.
One is that we've mentioned before, so in one of the Shiurim, that she died in childbirth, and so she didn't have a child until she died. That was number one, and the other one is what?
Stop there, Hannah. Let's just stop there. So the verse says at the bottom of the page there, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. Now the implication there is that she did have a child on the day of her death. In other words, she died in childbirth, exactly as Hannah has said. Okay, good, Hannah. Next comment.
The next comment is one that's written by, it's not mine, it's by Art Scroll. In their explanation for Eglah, they say that possibly she had no child from then on, but her child was born before then. So he already existed, and from that day on, she had no more children.
Right, so that's correct. Those are the two explanations. Why was she called Eglah as opposed to Michal? Why did her name get changed from Eglah to Michal? Anybody got any suggestions?
Art Scroll's got one.
Go on, tell us what Art Scroll says then.
Art Scroll says it was a nickname.
Why?
Similar to, because it was a term of endearment, and it was just a nickname.
And what does Eglah mean?
It's a calf.
A calf, yes. Where do we
like
that from?
like my lamb or my filly.
I think somebody said something there. Was it you, Barbara?
Eglah Trufa?
Eglah Arufa.
Arufa.
Eglah Arufa. Tell us about the Eglah Arufa.
I would if I could.
You just heard of it.
It's just something that is in the back of my head. But
Okay, so
it's when a dead body is found and nobody knows who killed them.
That's right.
And the two nearest villages, and there's two villages that are more or less the same distance from the body,
Okay.
and they have to take a calf and kill it, break its neck, I think.
Yeah.
Was Michal not the first wife, in fact?
Michal was the first wife.
So she would be referred to as his wife, and she was also the daughter of a king.
Okay, but there was a big, those of you who've been doing the Sanhedrin shir will know that there's a big machlokas as to whether she was actually married to David at all, whether it was a valid marriage. Why might it not have been a valid marriage?
She'd been given to somebody else.
She had been to somebody else after the marriage of David. Yes, that was why Palti's marriage might not have been valid. But why wasn't David's marriage to Michal, according to some people, not valid?
because he was still married
To her sister?
Yes, he was married, or was meant to have been married at least, to Meirav, her older sister. So if he's married to Meirav, he can't then go and marry Michal because that's not allowed. You can't marry two sisters in their lifetime. So that's what we've been learning about in the Sanhedrin shir. So yes, Eglah Arufa is when we have a dead body found between two towns. You measure the distance. We've done this in Sanhedrin as well, didn't we? A good year or two ago. You measure the distance, and the nearest town, the elders of the nearest the town have to do this process called Eglah Arufa, where they throw a calf breaking its neck, and to basically atone for any guilt that they may have had in the death of this fellow that was found. Okay, so Michal...
Don't they also have to say that we are not responsible for the death of this person?
That's right, and the reason they have to do this ceremony is because it may be that they were a bit guilty because they didn't give him supplies, or he didn't accompany him, and it may well be that the guilt is there, and so that's why we have to do the Eglah.
Question.
Yes.
That's where the minhag, or the concept of walking somebody out when they're leaving your home comes from. Is it halakha or is it just minhag?
Well, it's a halakha. It's a halakha. You're quite right. You are meant to accompany somebody. It's not just being polite. You're meant to accompany somebody at least a dalad amos, at least 4 amot away from your door when you have a guest, and you say goodbye to them, and you've fallen asleep on the couch because you've eaten, right? and you're sloughing, and your guest is going, and your wife wakes you up and says, your guest is going. You're meant to jump up and pretend that you weren't really asleep, and take them to the door and at least accompany them for Amot on. So that is actually a halacha, and you're absolutely right. It comes from the Egla Arufa, a story that we should make sure that our guests are safely accompanied. Yes, Philip, you're muted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
You know what my dad used to say when we had guests? He used to say, Oliver Shalom, he used to say, I don't know what you people are going to do, but I'm going to bed after he finished supper. And I walked the 4 hours. He didn't.
Not quite the way it's meant to be done. I once went out for dinner, only ever went to this place once. And when we'd finished, I was handed my coat.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll tell you the story actually, because it's actually a very funny story. I was unmarried, and I was living at home with my parents, and I never ever accepted Shabbos invitations because I wasn't a Nebuch case. I was with my parents. Anyway, I just qualified, and in the hospital there was a Jewish doctors sort of group. And this senior doctor, I won't give his name. This very senior doctor came and gave us a talk on stuff. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it might have been on end of life stuff. Anyway, he said some things. This senior doctor, who was also a rabbi, by the way, and he said also various things which I, in my youthful naivety and arrogance, disagreed with, and I voiced that disagreement, perhaps in a way in which wasn't entirely respectful or respectful enough. Anyway, I felt bad afterwards. And I think he also felt bad afterwards because he invited me to come to his house for Friday night. And so I thought I better go because, I hadn't been respectful. So I went. Didn't want to go, but I went. Anyway, so it comes to giving out the soup, and his wife, who was really, really yeckish, these were a very yeckish family. She was as yeckish as they come. She says, Would you like some soup, doctor? And I said, yes, please. She says, I was talking to my husband. Right? I'm not finished yet. I felt happy. And then she said, would you like some soup, Jonathan? And I said, yes, please. She said, I was talking to my son. So by this time, I just want the whole place to just, the ground to open up and just think, oh, this is just a disaster. Anyway, I just kept my mouth closed the rest of the time. Anyway, as soon as we finished benching, she gets up, this lady, she gets up and she goes and brings me my coat. I have to say,
very nice lady. She must have been really popular.
Yeah, I have never been made more welcome in my entire life. I was so delighted to get my coat that I took it and ran. Needless to say, I never went again.
What did she say to you when she was actually asking you if you wanted soup?
She never asked me. She just gave me because I already told her twice.
I'm trying to work out which doctor it was.
I'm not going to tell you.
There can't be many rabbi doctors in Manchester at that point in time.
Did he have a son that changed his name?
Not going to tell you.
Oh, Jeffrey, stop.
Just give initials.
Not going to tell you. No, not going to tell you. Right, let's go back to Shmuel Bet. Enough of this frivolity. I will never, ever forget that experience. I promise you. Right, so that was just a leftover from last week. The Eglah, it appears, and as Hannah said, it seems that Eglah was some say that Michal was David's favorite wife. And I don't accept that, by the way, because we spoke about this when we were doing Shmuel Aleph, that Michal goes out of her way to save David. Remember, she put those teraphim, those mannequins in the in bed, and he
Yes.
and he went down the out the window when Shaul was chasing him. She saved his life, and we're told on a number of occasions that Michal loved David very much. Two things about that. Number one, we don't ever see that David reciprocates that. It never says anywhere that David loved Michal. And second thing, it seems, you have to take my word for this, I haven't checked, but it's something that I read last night, that this is the only example in Tanakh where a woman expresses her love for a man. Does that surprise you? It surprised me. I mean, I'm taking it as correct because it came from a very reliable source, Rav Amnon Bazak. But I found that rather surprising. But apparently, that is the only example in Tanakh where a woman expresses love for a man. Quite interesting.
How about Rivka for Yitzchak?
Well, I would have thought so, but apparently not. You can see if you can find it for us, Peter.
Well, okay, but I thought it was in Toledot, I thought it was maybe, or the one before. Anyway, check it out.
We're told that Rivka loved Yaakov, her son.
Yeah.
We're not told Rivka loved Yitzchak, her husband.
Well, she liked the look of him, didn't she?
Yeah, when she first sees him, yeah.
Yeah, she when she first sees him, she puts a veil over her face. Yeah. But we're not told specifically that she loved him.
Right, okay.
We're often told that men loved women. We're told that Yaakov loved Rachel. Yeah. We're told that Yitzchak loved Rivka and took her into the tent of his mother. Yeah. It's comforting. But apparently, this is the only example in Tanakh of a woman expressing love for a man. I thought that was quite interesting. Yes, Jeffrey?
But I think it was the woman's duty. It hasn't to be said. It's the woman's duty to love the husband anyway. That's one of the duties of marriage.
No, it's the husband's duty to love his wife.
And it's a wife's duty to obey her husband.
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
Okay, let's move on.
Well, I think it's a good idea that the husband is duty bound to love his wife.
The husband is duty bound to give three things to his wife. You can't hear me again, is that right?
Spence has walked in to stop your voice.
Johnny,
yes, Ivor.
just talking there. Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at Masada of Cook that says two things about that. One, that he quotes also from Shmuel Aleph, yes, Shaul Natan et Michal bito esh David. King Saul gave Michal, his daughter, as the wife to David. And it refers also to the Eglah, that it's a kind of a form of endearment. Oh, my lovely little calf.
Yeah, that's what Hannah said before, which is correct. And it was, and that's obviously the source of that. It was a term of endearment. The three things that a man is obliged by the Torah to give to his wife.
Support.
Okay. Yes, but that's a broad term.
Satisfaction.
Financial support.
Satisfaction.
Yes, Ona. Yes. Conjugal rights is one of them.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what I mean. Conjugal rights.
Financial support. Financial support. What's the third
clothes. One? They have to have clothing.
Yeah. But that's financial support, isn't it? Clothes. It's included.
Specifically. Onak, suta, what's the third one? What's the third expression? Escapes me. David, help me out.
escapes me as well. I know exactly where it is in the Parashat Mishpatim, the end of Rishon.
Let's put it in. I've got to find this. Hang on a minute.
Love.
Doesn't he have to give her a ketubah? The ketubah.
That's all part of the ketubah.
Okay.
Ona ksuta.
What's the third one?
Mezonot. Mezonot?
She'era ksuta v'onata. There we go. It's in Shmot Chof Aleph. Let's get it up on the screen. Shmot Chof Aleph. Shmot Chof Aleph. There we go. We shall read that in about 6 weeks' time. Shmot Chof Aleph. There we go.
21.
21 was it?
Yeah, 21.
There we go. Oh no, that's not right. 21. Chapter 21. What pasuk? Pasuk Yud. Verse 10. There we go. Im acheret yikach lo she'era ksuta v'onata lo yigra. So if a man takes another wife, he's not allowed to remove those three things from his first wife. In other words, every wife that he has obligation to give she'era. That means sustenance, food. Ksuta, meaning clothing. Ve'onata, and conjugal rights. Those are the three things that are a Jewish husband is obliged at all times to provide for his wife. She'era ksuta ve'onata. Couldn't remember that she'era, but there it is. Okay.
What's she'era? What is she'era?
She'era means sustenance, means to food.
As in mezonot?
As in mezonot, yes. As in, yes. Right, let's go back to Shmuel Aleph. So, that's Eglah, that's Michal, all very interesting to do with the names, etc. Now we're going to come to the main thing that we're meant to be doing today, which is Avner's situation. Verse 6, Jeffrey.
Can't see it.
And it happened while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Avner exerted himself on behalf of the house of Saul.
Hang on a sec, Jeffrey. 1 sec. Can you not see the screen, everyone?
Yes, I can.
No, it's not on the screen.
Oh, it's only
The
you
text,
that can't see it. Everybody else can see it.
No, there's the old text there about Shera.
No, we've got the normal. We've got the text, proper
You
text.
haven't updated.
You need to refresh your screen, Philip. Go on, Jeffrey.
Now Saul had a concubine. Her name was Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. Ishbosheth, in brackets, said to Avner, "Why were you intimate with my father's concubine?"
Right, stop there. Stop there. I'm sorry that you said that in the art scroll, actually. Try and erase from your mind what Jeffrey just said, and now read it on the screen, Jeffrey, instead. Verse 7.
Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, and he said to Avner, "Why did you go into my father's concubine?"
Can you see that the difference? What was the difference between the screen and what Jeffrey said?
Oshbotet.
Yes, Ishbosheth. Here, if you look, if you read the verse up to the word Avner, now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Avner, and he said to Avner, and you just read that, who would you think that the subject of that he is?
Saul.
Saul. Yeah, on that reading, it's referring to Saul. It can't be Saul, can it? Number one, Saul's dead. And number two, have a look what he said. He says, "Why did you go into my father's concubine?" So obviously it's Ishbosheth speaking, because he was the only son left of Saul by this time. The others have been killed in the battle.
So this is obviously Ishbosheth, and you said Ishbosheth, Jeffrey, in the art scroll, and you said it in brackets, correct?
Yeah.
Now it's in brackets because it's not in the text, and it's there because it's telling us that it was Ishbosheth. Why do you think that the author of Shmuel Bet did not say explicitly, and Ishbosheth said to Avner, because it makes no sense the way it's written here in there. Yes, Philip, you're muted.
It was obvious he was the only one left.
Okay, that's true, but it's a funny way of saying things. Yes, Philip, you're muted. Philip, you're muted.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
It's very strange. The names are incredibly strange. I mean, Ishbosheth is a very strange name, and Ritzpah means a flaw. A flaw. Is there any reason for calling her that name?
Yeah.
Or was that the name that she was given when she was born?
I don't think any of these names are what they've been born with. We spoke about Ishbosheth a couple of weeks ago in some detail. Why he's called Ishbosheth.
I remember. Yeah.
And it was a name. It was a name of shame, really. Ishbosheth. Bosheth is.
Yes. That's exactly.
Nobody's.
Why call a woman? Why call a woman Ritzpah, flaw?
Nobody's going to call your kid man of shame, and nobody's going to call your daughter flaw, right? But if you
Flora.
Flora.
Yeah.
Flora. I don't think Flora means flaw.
Maybe she was a scullery maid.
Flora means flower.
Oh.
I think Ritzpah is a denigrating name in the same way as Ishbosheth.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think it's probably because she became a concubine. I mean, it's not a great job for a Yiddish girl, is it, to become a concubine? So yeah, okay. So why? Go back to my question. Michael says, well, because the Tanakh is saving words and it's obvious. I don't like that Michael. It doesn't make sense. I want a real reason why Ishbosheth is not mentioned by name here. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what.
Maybe it's self-explanatory.
That's what Michael said, but it's very poor literature. We've not mentioned Ishbosheth in this chapter even.
Yeah, but one verse ahead he is mentioned. It says that Avner became angry in the words of Ishbosheth, so it is there.
Where?
Verse 8.
Verse 8.
The next verse. Yeah, that's the next verse. So okay, you're right. You're right, but it would have made more sense if it had said, and Ishbosheth said to Avner, why did you go my furthest concubine? And Avner became very angry at his words, right? It's not sensible the way they've said it. Anyway, I'll tell you what Bazak says, which I think is quite a good idea. Yes, Philip, go on.
In today's army, in today's Tzahal, Avner wouldn't last a minute. I mean, he'd be chucked out for sexual harassment. Yitzchak Mordechai who was chief of staff at a certain moment, he was chucked out because of that.
Thank you for that. Right. So Rav Bazak says that the reason that Ishbosheth is not mentioned here by name is because he was a non-person. He was a weak king, and you'll see how weak he is in a minute. And it's a literary technique to diminish Ishbosheth as king of Israel. And it's almost like, he's a non-person. Now, what has Avner done here? He has appropriated Shaul's concubine. What's wrong with that? She's out of a job because Shaul's dead.
It shows pretensions to the throne.
Yes, it shows pretensions to the throne, correct. Because technically, presumably, she's got her P45 once Shaul's gone, right? She'd be looking for another job. And Avner comes along and says, all right, you can be my concubine now. So on the face of it, that would be all right. But Paul is absolutely right. This is not a good thing to do. It is a demonstration of pretensions to the crown. It's exactly a beautiful way of putting it, Paul. It is exactly that. We have two examples in Tanakh where this kind of behavior goes on and is very severely criticized. Where are they? I expect you to get one, and I don't expect you to get the other.
Was it David's son?
Oh, that's the one I didn't think you would get. Go on.
He took the concubine, didn't he?
Go
Adonaiah.
Adonyahu, yeah. It wasn't Avshalom, was it? It was Adonyahu, I thought. Maybe not.
Try again.
Okay. Oh, he took them. Avshalom.
Absalom.
Reuven.
Yeah, okay, that's the one I thought you would get, Hannah, is Reuven. Now we've got them both. Well done. Paul got the one I didn't think you'd get, and Hannah got the one thing. Let's go chronologically. We'll talk about Reuven first. On the screen for you, Jeffrey, verse 22, please, in chapter 35 of Bereshit, Vayishlach.
And it came to pass when Israel sojourned in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard of it, and so the sons of Jacob were 12.
Now that's a funny pass-up for a start, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's just talk about what happened. Vayelech Reuven, and Reuven went, Vayishkav et Bilhah pilegesh aviv. Okay, Vayishkav et Bilhah pilegesh aviv. And he went and lay with Bilhah, the concubine of his father. Now, if you want one of the greatest examples of whitewash in rabbinic history, then you can look in various Mefarshim on this, who say that Reuven did nothing of the sort, and all he did was he moved Yaakov's bed out of the tent of Leah and into the tent of Bilhah, or the other way around. No, the other way around. Out of the tent of Bilhah and into the tent of Leah. And he didn't do anything with Bilhah at all. He just moved Yaakov's marital bed. Now, in the immortal words of my father of blessed memory, that takes a bit of believing, because the words in the Hebrew are very clear. Vayelech Reuven vayishkav et Bilhah pilegesh aviv, and of course he's criticized for it. Reuven is told it's one of the reasons that he lost the Bechorah, he lost the birthright, and he didn't get a double portion. Who got the double portion from Yaakov?
Yosef.
He got Ephraim and Manasseh, became the tribes. Reuven should have got it. He was the firstborn. And of course, as a result of that, it's almost like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not very chuffed with that. Why do I say that?
There's also another issue. When Chachamim say that he moved the marital bed, the concept is that they slept on beds like we sleep on beds. But if one is realistic, nomadic peoples, and they were moving, they weren't like settled like we are. And the chances were that they were sleeping on carpets on the floor and not with a bed like we've got. So, you wouldn't be moving a bed because there's no bed to move.
Okay, I don't think that was that's not pshat for a start. I think it's an unnecessary whitewash of Reuven, which Reuven made an error, but it says it clearly what he did. Vayishkav et Bilhah pilegesh aviv. Yes, Reuven lost the Bechorah, and it went now. That's right. I asked you a question. why do I say that I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't pleased with what Yaakov did in removing the Bechorah from Reuven and giving it to Yosef? Why do I? What makes me say that I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't approve of that? Who can read my mind? David Marks is usually good at reading my mind. David, what do you think? What am I thinking of? I'll give you a clue.
I don't understand your question, John.
Okay, so Yaakov did not give the Bechorah to Reuven. He gave it to Yosef. Okay, he gave 2 tribes, and I say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't approve of that.
Didn't approve of that, or didn't approve of what Reuven did?
Didn't approve of what Yaakov did.
What Yaakov did.
I'll give you a clue. Parashat Kiteitzei.
Didn't hear that.
Yehuda. You go into Yehuda.
Kiteitzei, that's your clue.
Kiteitzei on Milchama.
Okay, I'll get you the exact thingy on the screen. I just got to look up exactly what chapter it is. We're reading Parashat Kiteitzei, chapter. Here we go. Chapter 21, verse 15. Let's get it up on the screen. Chapter 21 of Devarim. On the screen, Jeffrey, please.
Before I read it, is it because Yaakov expected Reuven, who was his first son, to be more in charge of his brothers and to be responsible for the missing Joseph?
Well, Reuven is criticized by Yaakov in Parashat Vayechi, which we'll read in a couple of weeks' time. He's criticized as being called Pachaz Kamayim, weak like water. Now, why is water weak? Water is weak because it goes wherever it's taken. So it's called.
Sounds breaking up. Sounds breaking up.
Jeff, we read verse 15 while you're waiting for that verse to come back.
If a man has 2 wives, one beloved and the other despised, and they bear him sons, the beloved one and the despised one, and the firstborn son is from the despised one, then it will be, on the day he, the husband, in brackets, bequeaths his property to his sons, that he will not be able to give the son of the beloved wife birthright precedent over the son of the despised wife, the real firstborn son. Rather, he must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that he possesses, because he, this firstborn son, is the first of his strength. Then he has the birthright entitlement.
Okay, so that is a halacha that is a completely, an absolute copy of what Yaakov didn't do. Okay, Yaakov did exactly the opposite of that. Now, no problem with that, because it was before Matan Torah, and despite the fact that the rabbis say that the Avot kept all the Torah, they obviously didn't keep this one, because this is exactly what Yaakov did. There was 2 wives. There was Leah. How is Leah described?
Was hated.
Sanu'ah.
Snua.
Hated. Now, Sanu'ah. Now, if you have a look at verse 15, this is what we're talking about. Shtei nashim, 2 wives, ha'achat, ha'ahuva, one love. Sanu'ah, the same word. Okay? Leah is described as Sanu'ah. So in our case here in Kiteitzei, a man has 2 wives. Let's say this man is called Yaakov. and let's say his two wives are called Leah and Rachel, and let's say Rachel is the loved wife and Leah is the hated wife in our pasuk here, and so they both bear sons. Leah, let's say, has a son called Reuven, and let's say Rachel has a son called Yosef. When he dies, Yaakov, he is not able to bequeath his property to his sons. He will not be able to give to the son of the beloved wife, Yosef, birthright precedence over the son of the despised wife, Reuven. Exactly what Yaakov did is forbidden to us by this halakha. Now, that's why I am presumptuous. Obviously, I have no idea whether HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought that what Yaakov did was right or wrong. I wouldn't presume to do so. I only said it really to be provocative. But from this halakha, it seems that if it was okay for Yaakov to do it, it's not okay for us to do it. If this halakha is the exact thing that Yaakov did. How did we get to that? Because we were talking about Reuven. Let's go back to Reuven. Reuven lay with Bilhah, the Pilegesh, the concubine of Jacob. Just as a by the way, it's interesting that she's described here as a Pilegesh, because we all say that Yaakov had 4 wives, don't we?
Yeah.
We don't describe Bilhah and Zilpah. We give them the status of wives. Why do we give them?
No, we give Johnny. I don't agree with that. That we give them Rachel and Leah the status of wives, and Bilhah and Zilpah are given the status of concubines. They're not given the status of wives.
Here they're given the status of concubines, but there are places we describe Yaakov as having 4 wives. And the reason that we do that is because they are the mothers of the Shiftei Ka. They are the mothers of part of the 12 tribes. They were obviously, very special people in their own right. So anyway,
one of the reasons for all our problems today.
Reuven does this act, which is a negative act, and he is very, very seriously criticized for it. He loses one of the reasons that he loses the birthright, and this actually was worse than what Avner did. Why was it worse than what Avner did? Yaakov was still alive. Yaakov was still alive here. At least with Avner, Shaul had died, so it was less of a problem. But anyway, Reuben did this, and as Paul said, this was a pretension to the crown to have relation with the concubine of the king, or the head of the family in this case, is tantamount to a claim to the throne. The other one, which Paul actually got, is in Avshalom. We were talking about Avshalom. Where is it? There it is. Read for us on the screen, Jeffrey, verse 21. It's in Shmuel Bet Chapter 16.
And Ahithophel said to Absalom, come into your father's concubine, come into your father's concubines, that he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are abhorred of your father. Then the hands of all that are with you will be strengthened. And they spread for Absalom a tent upon the roof, and Absalom came to his father's concubines before the eyes of all of Israel. And the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, as was if a man inquired of the word of God, so it was the counsel of Ahithophel both to David and to Absalom.
Okay, we'll come back to that last pasuk in a minute. So what Ahithophel, who was one of the advisors of David and then to Avshalom, said, this was nothing to do with desire or lust or anything like that. This was an act of politics. Ahithophel said to Avshalom, you have relations with your father's concubines in public, in front of Israel, and that will be the demonstrating act that you are the pretender to the crown. Okay? And that's what they did. And look at verse 22. They spread for Avshalom a tent upon the roof, and Avshalom came to his father's concubines before the eyes of all Israel. It was an act of rebellion, an act of taking the pretension to the crown.
Was it rape?
Was it rape? We don't know whether the concubine consented or not. They were. I don't know really what the status of concubines were. I suspect it was rape.
Art Scroll says, I haven't said anything, that after a king dies, no one is allowed to marry her, because they give a concubine is no one's allowed to marry the king's wife, and then it says concubines are given the status of wives. Yeah, okay. So if she was the king's concubine, she had the status of a wife. And the question is, my question stands, was it rape?
Okay, so first of all, what you said there, we've learned in Sanhedrin, if you remember, we learned that it's not actually true what you said, because there is somebody that can marry the widow of a king. Who can marry the widow of a king?
Another king.
Another king, that's right. So if Avner is going to become the king, then he can marry them. Is it rape? I suspect it was rape as we would understand rape today, Hannah. And I suspect that all concubines were raped. And I suspect that all wives were raped as well back in those days, because I don't think that the issue of consent, of women giving consent, was much of a thing back in those days. Did Esther consent to go with Achashverosh? I'm pretty certain that she would not have done of her own volition. So probably the answer to your question is yes. Go on, Philip.
I think you're very harsh about men in those times.
Does anybody disagree with me?
I think, yes, I do.
What, you think that men would have taken into account their wives' or concubines' consent?
Well, we see with the Dudaim. We see with the Dudaim.
I was in the middle of a question.
Yeah, but you were muted. So we'll come back to you, Philip. Just hang on. Go on, Hannah. Finish your point.
We see with the Dudaim that Reuven picked that Leah was very upset about giving them to Rachel. Yeah. Why would she be upset if she was being raped by her husband because he didn't take into account her feelings? I think that husbands in those days were pretty much like husbands in these days. I don't think that one of the things that we learn from Torah is that human nature doesn't really change all that much over time.
I don't think we're talking about human nature. I think we're talking about the status of women in society. I think the status of women in society today is much higher than it was then. And I don't think that's just my view. I don't think that
Paltiel was shedding tears when he had to give Michal back. Yeah, and nobody. He didn't even have marital relations with her. I think that men in those days had the same feelings as men today. And I don't think that men today are all bad. True, there are. And my mother had a Russian mitapelet who said that men in Russia behave basically the way you were describing. And I won't go into details, but I think that I don't see it's related to the political status of women.
Okay,
it's like saying that if women aren't paid the same salary, then men are, excuse the language, but I'm Australian, then men are bastards. No, I think that family is one thing, and society is another.
Well, I think we'll have to agree to disagree, because I think that women back in the day were treated like chattels on men, not all the time and not by everybody, but I think by and large, I don't think that women's feelings were taken into account very much in these matters. So that's just my view. Are you entitled to disagree? Absolutely. Yes, Philip.
Yeah, but before I was interrupted, I just wanted to say that if the rape occurred, why isn't the word used in the Tanakh? Because the Tanakh is very truthful according to what we have learned, and the word rape should be used.
Okay, so do you think that
if rape occurred, that is what I mean.
Rape didn't exist in those days.
Do you think?
I mean, if you take the case of Dinah, for instance, if you take the case for Dinah in last week's parasha, right? There are some Meforshim who think that Dinah wasn't raped by Shem, but that it was consensual. So, I mean, using the word rape is a little bit, facile, easy to use.
Let me just put it into context. Here we're talking about, let's talk about the one we've got on the screen with Avshalom. Do you think that David's concubine, we're not told her name or who they are, this particular one, do you think that she would have consented to have had relations with Avshalom on the roof in front of all of Israel? I think that's unlikely. That's unlikely. And therefore, I think that's rape. Okay, let's go on. Let's go on. Right.
Oh, by the way, I agree with you that I think that Avshalom, that it's rape with Avshalom.
There you are. Right, let's go on. So, Avner has cohabited with Ritzpah, who was the daughter of Aya, and Avner and Ishbosheth is not happy. He's not happy, and he says, "Why did you go into my father's concubine?" And Avner is not happy either. Jeffrey, are you with us? No, Jeffrey's dropped off. Right.
No, he's not. He's with you.
He's with us. Right. Verse 8, Jeffrey, in our chapter 2. Verse 8.
And Avner became very angry at the words of Ishbosheth, and he said, "Am I the head of the dogs which belong to Judah? Shall I do kindness today with the house of Shaul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, as I have done until now? And I have not delivered you into David's hand, and you charge me today with the guilt concerning the woman."
Right, stop there, Jeff. So Avner says, "You chutzpahdik," he says to Ishbosheth. Chutzpah. After all I've done for you, I didn't hand you over to David. I've made you into the king. I've supported you as the king. I'm the real power here. Without me, you'd be nothing. And you've got the chutzpah to say to me, I can't have I can't have Shaul's concubine. Well, yeah, that is an outright chutzpah, says Avner, and he's not happy at all. And look what he said, what he does. Okay, verse 9, Jeffrey.
So may God do to Avner, and so may he do further to him, in brackets, if he does not keep this oath. For just as Hashem has sworn to David, so shall I do for him.
Stop.
To remove the king.
Stop there. What is he talking about here? Avner makes an oath and says, as Hashem has sworn to David, so I shall do to him. What is Avner saying here?
He's threatening to give Ishbosheth back to David.
Yeah, he's changing sides. He's crossing the house. He's crossing the floor here. This is remarkable. Verse 10, Jeffrey.
To remove the kingship from the house of Saul, and to establish the throne of David upon Israel and upon Judah, from Dan to Beersheba.
Stop there. Stop there. So this is remarkable. Avner has taken the concubine of Shaul. Ishbosheth has told him off for it. And Avner has thrown his toys out of the pram and said, right, I'm off. I'm going to join David. And you know what? I'm going to help David do all the things that I've been fighting against just now. I've been supporting the house of Shaul against David for the last 7 years. And now I'm going to turn. He's basically crossed the floor. He's changed sides. He's now going to be on David's side, and he's going to hand over, and he's going to enable the united kingdom of Judah and Israel to come together. Avner is the absolute classic kingmaker. Literally, he is the kingmaker. Avner has made Ishbosheth king, and now he's thrown out his dummy, spat out his dummy, and he's now going to make David king. And he's made an oath. That's what he's going to do. Now, if you were Ishbosheth, what would you do?
Shut up.
Yeah. Well, if it was me, I'd apologise straight away and say you can have the woman, right? But he doesn't. Look what he says. Well, he doesn't say anything. Verse 11.
Ishbosheth, in brackets, was no longer able to respond to Avner a word because of his fear of him.
He was scared stiff. He's petrified with fear. And again, the same technique, according to Rav Bazak, doesn't use the name Ishbosheth. Jeffrey read it out in brackets there in the art scroll, but we don't have it here. And the Hebrew doesn't mention his name. He's a non-person, this Ishbosheth. He could not answer Avner another word because of his fear of him. He's scared stiff, and that's it. So Avner is as good as his word. Verse 12.
Avner sent messengers to David from his place, saying, "Who is the land, in brackets, if not yours?" and saying, "Seal your covenant with me, and behold, my hand will be with you to turn all of Israel to you."
There. So Avner sends a message to David to switch sides and says, "You know, David,
You're
that
still,
Have I gone again?
you're still.
No good?
Not yet.
All right. No.
Yes.
No. Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll just finish on this point. Avner sends a message to David saying, "You know you can't do this without me. You know that I'm the real power behind Ishbosheth's throne. You know that Ishbosheth is just a puppet king, and I'm really the power in the kingdom of Saul. Make a covenant with me, and I will bring you to the whole of Israel. I, Avner, will enable you to do what you've wanted to do, which is to unite the Jewish people, to unite the people of Israel and the people of Judah, and you will become David Melech Yisrael." And we'll just finish with the last verse here, verse 13. David says,
"Good, I shall seal a covenant with you, but I request one thing of you, that is, you shall not see my face unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you enter to see my face."
so David says, right, okay, you're on. I accept. But there's a condition. I want Michal back. Now that's very interesting why he wants Michal back. And we will talk about that, please God, next week. Although we might not be learning next week because of Project Esther. But whenever it is the next time we learn, we will we'll talk about this particular passage. Why does David want Michal back? But here, the remarkable thing that I promised you last week is that Avner, the general of Shaul, who is the puppet master of Ishbosheth, has thrown a wobbly and he has crossed the floor and become David's partner in which will end with the united kingdom of Judah and Israel. And Avner really is the kingmaker. Quite a remarkable story that Avner, who's not a particularly pleasant personality, he is the kingmaker. He has, in effect, he will seal the fate of the kingdom of Shaul, and he will make good his promise to David to deliver this united kingdom to him. And we'll carry on from there next time. Any questions on today's shiur before we go?
I think it justifies the comment you made very early about Ishbosheth being a puppet and weak, and that displayed his weakness. He just didn't have an answer.
Yeah, and you'll see next time that his behaviour with Paltiel, who's the wife of Michal, also demonstrates his powerlessness in the face of Avner. He was scared stiff of Avner. He had no real power himself. And remember where was he reigning? Can anybody remember where his palace was?
The other side of the Jordan.
The other side of the Jordan in
Machanaim? No.
Machanaim, correct. It was in Machanaim, miles away. And that's where, remember, we said it a week or two ago, that's where Avner shipped him into Machanaim, out of the way.
And they just found a palace there, didn't they?
Yeah, they did find a palace, correct. And so Ishbosheth was just a puppet king, and as Jeffrey said, we've demonstrated that par excellence here. A very interesting little section there. Actually, only 6 verses, but it's 6 very, very important verses, which in effect enabled David to become the famous David Melech Israel.
But it took 6-7 years for that to happen.
It did. It was 7 years. It was 7 years that David reigned in Hebron. We know that from the beginning of this chapter, I think. Not over here, maybe the end of the last chapter. It says that he was king in Hebron, king of Judah in Hebron for 7 years, and then he became king of all Israel. And we'll see how it goes next time. We'll move on.
But it mentions also the city of David. And is that the city of David in Jerusalem?
Yes,
or
that was from over here, Jeffrey, with the over here with the ark. That was later on when he had conquered Jerusalem.
So that became okay.
That was when he brought the ark in, when Michal criticised him, rather than at this particular point.
But interestingly, it also said that she despised him.
Yeah, it does. It does. She despised. It does. We'll get to it eventually. It's actually only in chapter 6. So,
but did she despise him because he took her away from Paltiel?
We're not told that. I read it that she despised him in her heart, and we're not told why. I would suspect that on the surface she despised him because he in her eyes he demeaned himself in front of the public, which he shouldn't have done, according to her.
You're not wrong.
His answer, as we read earlier on, was no. Kodesh Baruch, this is a massive thing, and I should be dancing with the people because Kodesh Baruch has done this wonderful thing. I agree with you, Jeffrey. She's got a point. The king does have to have a certain dignity, which in her
decorum. I think the word is decorum. I think
he was not acting in a dignified way, but I suspect there's more to it than that. I suspect that she loathed him in her heart because of unrequited love. She loved him, and he didn't love her back.
But he tried to demonstrate it by wanting her back.
I know. That's what we're going to discuss next week. That's what's so interesting about this last pasuk that we just said, that he said to Avner, I'll go with your covenant, but you've got to bring me back Michal. And the question is, why did he want Michal back? And that's what we're going to discuss next time.
Also.
Yes, go
hello. On. If we think back to the time when Goliath and Shaul was giving away his daughters, I think there's a pasuk there that says, "And Michal loved David."
Correct. It does. That's the pasuk we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah.
Which we said was the only time in Tanakh where a woman expresses love for a man.
Johnny, you made a point about how it mentioned he, not Ishbosheth. But then in verse 13 here, talking about David, it says he when he responds. So how do you explain that?
Verse 30, because we've already mentioned David in this previous pasuk. Oh no, wait a minute. Let me go back. Verse 13. Yeah, in verse 12 we mentioned David. Remember, before we hadn't mentioned Ishbosheth. You pointed it out yourself. It's in the next pasuk.
Yeah, but then again, when he said it again after that, he said he. It repeated he, and he said it. Yeah, slight inconsistency.
Okay, you don't have to like it. It's Rav Bazak. I'll tell him that Paul Westbrook didn't like us.
Okay.
He'll take a lot of notice.
I'm sure he will. He's a fine fellow. Right. Okay. Chanukah Sameach, everybody. Let me stop the recording.